into doing anything more than the metrics that you're asking for, which leads to the apathy phase, which is people figure out how to game the system. As a CPO, and this is when I'm talking to some of the agencies now, they're figuring out how to anti-game the system. If you're going to be in charge of performance for the organization and you go through all this trouble to set this stuff up, and then people just figure out, well, if I just measure this metric, I'm going to get a check mark. I'll give you an example. I worked with a computer hardware company, and they decided that one of their leading indicators was what they called number of meaningful sales discussions that their sales reps would have. If they saw that there was an increase in that, there would eventually be an increase in customer activity, which eventually lead to higher amount of orders, which would lead to higher net margins. So what they did was they built into their CRM system, I want you to start tracking what you call meaningful meetings with customers, because we see that's a leading indicator. Initially, everybody, they started to fill this stuff in, and they just figured if you check that little checkbox in there that said it was a meaningful meeting, even if it wasn't, even if you showed up in the guy's lobby and he wasn't there and you just were tracking your time and checked that, management would leave you alone because you were doing the metric that they wanted. So you need to be prepared that people are going to game the system. The CPO needs to constantly evolve, constantly be changing what's happening with the metrics. Just when you set it up, you need to grow. And that's part of where a lot of the great technology comes into place, is scalable data models and business intelligence systems and predictive modeling. All these things enable you to get out of a static mode, and as a chief performance officer, manage performance actively for the organization. So how do you get people on board with this? There's 3 ways that you need to kind of align the stars on this one here. You're going to need that top-down support. Think about the federal government. Who was paying attention to performance before Obama made this announcement? Nobody and everybody. The Office of Management and Budget, OMB, was kind of looking at it. Why do you think we've run amok on this? Why do you think we had to create this? There was no top-down support for what was going on. There was no edict saying you need to manage performance and these are the 10 metrics that you need to manage to. In the case of the government, a lot of them are cost avoidance, spend leakage type of metrics. In the case of a commercial organization, it could be revenue growth, it could be market share, it could be a lot of other things like that. The top-down support, the traceability back to the metrics that matter most to the people in the corner suite in your organization. This is the breakdown where a lot of our BI systems actually don't make it to the next level. We do really good at helping out the sales part of the organization or the marketing part of the organization, or maybe even making sales and marketing understand how their 2 metrics come together. But we don't make that tie-up to those critical measurements that our executive management lives and dies, literally, their career by. We kind of break that into, well, you got this whole strategic system and then you got all this operational stuff out here. CPO needs to understand and enlist that top-level support. The way you enlist the top-level support is say, I'm going to get beyond my operational stuff. I'm going to get beyond even what matters to the VP of sales or even the CFO and start to understand the metrics that run across the whole part of the organization. It's, the other thing is business enablement. Part of this is like I talked about with stewardship, getting people on board with this. Getting people that are going to come and want to use this system. And it's been a challenge for us for a long time in our industry, whether it was BI systems or whether it was data warehousing, trying to get people on board with doing this. It's no different. The game has changed a little bit, and then there's less money to go around, but if you use a lever like Chief Performance Officer, it could open up some of those dollars for doing that. But getting business on board that you're going to make a change for what's happening for them. And then the last thing is IT enablement. And this is kind of the feather in the cap for a lot of us, because I've been in this industry doing BI data warehousing since before we called it that. And a lot of the decisions that we've made over the last dozen years of buying this technology, building this data warehouse, investing in this BI tool, doing this modeling, now's a chance to kind of say, here's how it all kind of comes together to something at an executive level that you can care about. In other words, pat yourself on the back. You've made some good technology decisions. We've built some good systems, and now we could say, you know what, we can use that to bring this thing to the next level. The hardest thing, where I just worked with an organization and they got into this whole religious war about, well, because we're going to be doing performance management, our BI stuff isn't going to work. It's like, and it got kind of held up in committee, this thing. It never really got beyond doing anything. Whereas if you talk about how you enable IT and how you use what's out there in the organization, you're going to see some great things on the expo floor here. And a lot of these technologies are great and complementary to the technologies that you have. Some will cause you to replace, do other things, but that shouldn't be where the focus should be. It's just part of the puzzle, and that's what gets you your CPO success. And again, it's not about the title. You know, hopefully if you take away something from here, CPO is a way of doing things that happens to have some nice press around it that you could probably leverage in your organization to maybe get some projects started and/or make some changes in your organization that are lasting. You know, it's not about saying I have a CPO. So what's the summary on this here? You got to measure what matters and manage what can be measured. It is not about more metrics, please. If you build the mother of all data warehouses, no one will come. It's just not going to happen. The CPO, if you look at what the methodology is about, what Obama has asked, what the CPOs that are successful in current commercial organizations, they concentrate on the metrics that mean something to the business, and then the technology is kind of an afterthought for it. You know, if you think about 12 years ago when we were building data warehouses, most people built a sales data warehouse or something, you know, a financial data warehouse. And by the way, there were line items in there for buying ETL, buying your BI tool, buying all these other things. That's kind of the mentality the CPO needs to have, is that you're concentrating on the metrics. You know, you got to bridge that what and the why zone. You got to be thinking. You got to be one step ahead of your folks. And you know what? That means getting in a very, very uncomfortable position of sitting down with your business folks and saying, how do you measure things? And what do you really do? How come you don't use this system? What do you use from the system? Share with me your spreadsheet, and I'll take genuine interest in what you're doing instead of just taking the printout and, you know, building another system from scratch. So it's understanding and getting into there, bridging the 6 C's, you know, getting the data, and then communicating and collaborating on that data, and then providing a governance and stewardship process which is wrapped around this. If you have an integrated technical platform, there's more time to spend on the business. If you don't, you got to spend some time integrating your technologies together. So again, leverage, particularly with the vendor consolidation that's happened over the last couple of years in our space. A lot of pieces that we used to have to kind of, when I was young, I remember my dad getting me an erector set, the one that had the big crane that cranked and stuff. And all I wanted to do was play with the erector set, play with the crane, and do this. But I had to wait for my dad, because my dad worked during the week. I had to wait for the weekend for my dad and I to put the darn thing together, and then I could play with it for a little bit. A lot of the vendors have already put together the erector set. Yeah, it's not perfect. You know, a lot of it has pieces. You can kind of put it together and spend more energy on actually delivering value. And the last thing is to really leverage organizational components that you already have in place. If you have a PMO in place, if you have a portfolio management committee in place, if you have a office of performance management in place, you know, these are the perfect organization structures to leverage for doing this, to introduce these type of concepts in here of having top to bottom metrics, the 6 C's across there, build on top of what you have already right now, as compared to saying, well, that stuff doesn't matter. I want to have a chief performance officer. I want to have this new committee for doing this. Nobody wants to be part of a new committee. It's pretty easy to take and piggyback this type of concepts into an existing PMO or an existing portfolio management process that you may already have in place. So that, you know, that's what the Chief Performance Officer is about. You know, my takeaway for you is that performance management is alive. Performance management is something that can live in your organization, needs to be managed from a top down, but needs something from the bottom up. It's part technology, part communication, and it's definitely all business for what you're doing. There's some links up here. Oh my gosh. It's not my PC. There's some links up here if you want to see what's going on, and also, like we mentioned, I'm embarking on some academic research, which is I'm not selling consulting. There's no dollars. There's nothing involved with that. I'm looking for companies that are managing performance, either good or bad, in either a anonymous mode or whatever. If you want to reach out to me through TDWI or through one of these links here, that would be great. I finished up 1 minute early. So I want to thank all of you, and enjoy the conference. Make sure to get the most out of this. This is a great conference this week.